everyone, and welcome to the Colts Cover 2 podcast. I am IndyStar Colts insider Jim Ayello, and I am joined, as always, by fellow insider and co-host Joel Erickson. Joel, we just heard from Frank Reich for the first time since the Combine. A lot has changed about the Colts roster since then. Unfortunately, I was 100% wrong about whether or not he'd be wearing a hat and whether or not he'd have a beard. I thought both of those things would happen because of this coronavirus that's kept us all inside. I now owe you another Subway sandwich. I am devastated.
Yep. Yeah. I just you haven't done enough work on Frank's fashion choices to make the right bets. That's just the way it is.
I just thought like the rest of us, and I didn't go hat either. You did during this Zoom press conference that we had with Frank today. But I thought, I had my wife, we bought clippers on Amazon. They shipped them. She gave me a haircut. It worked out okay. I didn't think most people were resorting to those measures, so I just assumed we'd see a lot of hats. I thought, Frank rocks the hat occasionally when he does the pressers. I don't know. I that's what I was banking on. Definitely longer hair for Frank, though, I will say.
Yeah, and maybe if we have one around the draft, maybe you'll get lucky and you'll get the hat.
Also, not the monster.
I don't remember when I had the last haircut, but I know it's getting a little shaggy up top, and so I've just been wearing baseball caps on my Zoom calls. Plus, let's be honest, I'm taking the opportunity that everyone's going to expect people to be wearing hats, so I can save on having to do anything to my hair.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, like I said, are saving money, not having to go get their haircuts, so that's good. And most people aren't seeing people all the time, so that works out pretty well. What was your disappointment level on not seeing like big bushy Frank Reich beard though?
It's funny that Jim brings this up. We talked about it the other day, but Frank Reich can grow it's probably the best coach beard in the NFL.
That's a good question. I have to think about that.
It's probably the best coach beard in the NFL. In terms of I know Matt Patricia has that crazy unkempt thing.
Yeah.
But as somebody who's neither of us can really grow a beard.
I'll copy
but
that.
my
true.
brother can, and as somebody whose brother can grow like a full out folk rock banjo player beard, Patricia just doesn't take good enough care of his. It's like a ratty mall Santa type of beard.
I hope your brother listens to this podcast.
No, Patricia's is a ratty mall Santa type of beard. My brother's is like perfectly manicured.
Okay.
Yeah. But so now I hope Matt Patricia listens to it. He probably wants it to look like a ratty mall Santa like type beard.
Yeah, you're probably right. That's the look he's going for sure.
Frank's is more like Gary Cooper about to defend a small town against a bunch of rustlers. That's what I get out of his.
Yeah. I'm looking. I googled just NFL. Mike Vrabel looks like he grows a decent beard when he wants to. There was one I had for you though. Mike McCarthy. This picture of Mike McCarthy is a big bushy beard. I think maybe.
Okay,
post
I'll Google it over here and see what I have a hard time believing it's gonna.
Also, want to know a weird thing? When you Google just the phrase NFL coaches, Bill Parcells is the first picture that comes up.
Yeah, you know what? That's a very Wisconsin beard that McCarthy has.
Yeah.
But a little bit, I don't know, needs a little bit more tender care to look the way it needs to.
You know what I love about you, Joel, is that when we talk jerseys, you're like, I don't know anything about jerseys, I don't care. But like when we go beard, you are just like full in, like this needs to be manicured this way, and yeah, no, I.
Well, my brother has been telling me about his for a long time, so I've picked it up by osmosis, even though I can't grow one at all. The funny thing is, I'm looking through. I found a thing that said all 32 coaches beard. There's not a lot of bearding in the coaches' world.
No, not unless you're going for young genius look like Sean McVay, which is
McVay's is strong, but McVay's is like millennial.
Yeah,
like,
Shanahan. That's the same. Yeah.
Frank's is more like cowboy, and I'm partial. I'm partial to just like looking like if you put on a hat and a gun that you could definitely take out Javier Bardem in a movie.
Wow, you went from Gary Cooper to Javier Bardem. That's going to be some overlap there, but that's
I switched my. I can't remember. I couldn't come up with a good Gary. Like I can't remember what the actor's names from High Noon is for the villain.
Ooh, yeah, I don't know. I can tell you that we've gone wildly off the rails just to start the podcast, so that's good. Which is crazy since we actually have plenty of things to talk about now that we've talked to Frank Reich and they've made a bunch of moves at corner and defensive tackle, and so yeah, maybe. I mean, I hope you guys all enjoyed that. But we'll now that we've covered Frank's hair and beard, we're going to talk about what his face actually said today, and that was kind of what you'd expect. I mean, I think that they really liked Phillip Rivers. To me, what I got out of we got 30 minutes with him, and what I pretty much came out of that was once Phillip Rivers became a free agent, Frank was like, I need to watch the film, but this is my guy. Is that what you got?
Yeah. It sounded like it was. It sounded like that, and then I think also he went back to the tape several times to defend Rivers' physical abilities and the idea that he's not dropping off physically, the way people have sort of said. But yeah, I think it was pretty clear that the all of the reasons that everybody said, the muscle memory involved in coaching him, knowing intimately how he goes about his business and how he processes information. I think all that stuff kind of gave him the lead in the horse race very early, and then the tape didn't do anything to dissuade them.
Yeah, I think in both instances, when you actually say that the tape being Jacoby's tape and the tape being Phillip Rivers' tape, I think they looked back and looked at Jacoby's tape and thought, this is not good enough, at least not compared to Phillip Rivers. And what Frank started the press conference by saying, he thought this was a wildly unique opportunity to get a future Hall of Fame quarterback. That's what he believes in Phillip Rivers. That's debatable about the future Hall of Fame thing. We could do that later. But he thought it was a very unique opportunity to go get a guy like that. He still reiterated he believes in Jacoby, believes Jacoby will be a starter in the NFL at one point in his career later on. We can get more into Jacoby soon, but what I wanted to stress was that they saw Phillip Rivers' tape. He saw Phillip Rivers' tape. Nick Sirianni, Jason Michael, guys with him that worked with him in San Diego, and thought this is the same guy that we worked with all those years ago, physically. And so I think they feel like they can kind of reconjure some of the magic they had, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, and I think the tell. I mean, we've written about why it was Rivers and not other people in several articles, but I think the tells were all there. I think it was Frank mentioned everything that we would think about. The ability to process information quickly, which he values very highly, and which Jacoby Brissett didn't do very well last year.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that he mentioned that several times. He talked about, and I thought this was maybe the most interesting quote about quarterback play that he had in the whole thing. When he was talking about the interceptions, he said that when they had, sometimes it comes down to when they happen, late in games, what's the score, that kind of thing. And he said something to the effect of, I don't have the quote exactly in front of me, but I remember the gist of it was when other quarterbacks maybe are taking checkdowns, and the imply part of it is that they're taking checkdowns in order to make sure their stats look good and don't pad their stats. Rivers is firing to win games, and I thought that was a pretty interesting window into what Frank Reich wants out of a quarterback and what Phillip Rivers gives them. And we've all written that he's going to throw the ball down the field more, and I wrote and went through the numbers and said he definitely did it more than Brady or Brissett or any of those guys.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
To hear Reich say it and back it up, I thought that was probably the most revealing quote about the quarterbacks of the whole thing.
I thought there was one other part, but I wanted to get to one thing else I liked, I should say. But to get to what you were saying, I think I saw a stat on Twitter somewhere, and I wish I had it, and I should have saved it. But it was something about I think it was five of Rivers' interceptions last year were thrown in the fourth quarter with the team trailing. It was I think it was a league high number. in terms like just to kind of back up what you were saying, he was kind of some of those interceptions were just like trying to do something magical to bring the Chargers back last year, and I think Reich kind of excuses those in a way, and maybe he should. I'm not saying he shouldn't do that. I think it's an interesting way to look at some of those interceptions because you see 20 and that's kind of eye popping, right? But when you kind of look at when you contextualize them, it's maybe a little bit different. And that seemed to be what Frank was saying. The other big number or big thing I thought was interesting was that Frank was pretty comfortable saying Phillip Rivers knows 80 to 85% of my playbook. And that's a huge deal. And I think you've talked about this, and you've really harped on this, I think, over the last few weeks. But, it's a huge deal to have relationships, but it's an even bigger deal to have those relationships now during the pandemic when you're not really going to be able to see each other as much.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that people have talked about in the NFL is that there's going to be less time for people to learn the offense in the way that they're used to learning it. Frank Reich did talk today about, and this should surprise no one, but Frank Reich has spent a lot of time thinking about how he can teach players during the summer, even if they cannot meet.
Right.
It's looking increasingly like we're not going to have OTAs or anything this offseason. I think we might just be starting up a training camp. But in a time when you don't necessarily have a chance to get somebody in a room and talk to them face to face, having somebody come in who's a different who you can acquire as a different quarterback and an upgraded quarterback, but they don't really need to learn anything, is a pretty big advantage over having to bring somebody else in and teach them an entirely different scheme.
Yeah, and that to me is kind of the link to the Tom Brady conversation, which was, and again, you talked about this in a story you wrote about what made Rivers more appealing to Frank's offense versus Brady, but I also thought, while Frank showered Brady with praise today, talked about he watching his film, said he hasn't really lost much of his step and all those things, but ultimately they decided Phillip was the better fit. I think a lot of it has to do with what you just talked about, the fact that they're not able to get together. And I know, Tom's talked a lot about Tom Brady. He's talked a lot about getting to, trying to watch as much film on Bruce Arians' offense and studying. It's a lot of work they're going to have to do. The Rivers Reich relationship won't have to do nearly as much work to make it work in Indianapolis.
Right. No, I think that's definitely true. With those older guys like Brady and Rivers, I think you assume that they can absorb stuff pretty well.
Right.
But it helps. It helps if a guy already knows 85% of the playbook in a time when you don't have an off season to get ready the way you normally would.
So let me ask you about so obviously Frank knows Phillip Rivers, and again, we're not talking about the football. We're not just talking about the football player. He's been over to his house. He's met his kids. He knows that family very well. Nick DeSirianni knows Phillip Rivers. Jason Michael knows Phillip Rivers. The guy who doesn't really know Phillip Rivers is Chris Ballard. And I was curious. We didn't get a chance to really ask Frank this question. And maybe it's not a question for him. Maybe it's a question for Chris. But to me, Chris is putting a lot on the line in terms of trusting Frank and his coaches to make this decision. I know it's only a 1-year contract, and to me, that's, I think, in a way, Chris kind of protecting himself, saying, I trust your opinion, but let's give it a year and see what it is with Phillip Rivers. But I think he's putting a lot of trust in Frank's opinion and his ability to get the best out of Phillip Rivers.
Well, and I think he's also probably putting a lot of trust in his own ability to watch tape. I think the tape matters in term for if you don't know a player. Frank said today they went back and watched everybody who was possibly available. He watched everybody. He watched the last 2 full years of Brady. I'm assuming that means he watched the last 2 full years of everyone. And so you got to go back to the tape. And part of the story that I did breaking down like how they throw and stuff. Last year the numbers weren't really close in terms of accuracy throwing downfield, likelihood throwing the ball downfield. Rivers was way ahead of Jacoby Brissett, Tom Brady. There's obviously other guys that were available, but some of them wouldn't have had, like Nick Foles was a possibility, but Nick Foles' tape was incomplete last year, so I didn't necessarily include it. But I think the tape is what convinces Ballard to trust in Frank's evaluation and trust it over just he coached with him before.
I agree. I'm not saying Chris didn't watch the tape and was like, "Are you sure about this guy? I don't really know." I definitely think Chris watched and liked what he saw. But ultimately, he's not the one coaching. He's not the one working with them every day. And ultimately, you and I have talked about this a lot of times. I wrote it recently in the Andrew Luck story I wrote, but Chris's job in a lot of ways kind of relies on what happens at the quarterback position for the Colts now. And like I said, I don't think if this season goes off the rails bad and Rivers is bad, I don't think Chris is getting fired. I don't think Frank's getting fired. I don't think that's where we're at right now as an organization looking at the Colts. But I do think that it does put more pressure on them. And he knows this. Chris Ballard knows that. And he also knows that you don't get a lot of opportunities to be a GM in this league. So he does have to put, again, even if he likes the tape, he does have to put a lot of trust in what Rivers and those coaches can get. I'm sorry, Reich and those coaches can get out of Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and that's sort of the unspoken thing. I can't remember if we spoke it or not, but that's the thing about what happened when Andrew Luck retired. Was it threw the franchise and both of the decision makers for the Colts who don't own the team
Right.
into a very different paradigm than they were in before. They were building around a quarterback, and then all of a sudden they lost that, and it just happens to be the most important position in sports. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of things. I wrote a story about kind of the repercussions of Andrew Luck's retirement still following these guys, and that is a big one. I mean, it's not just the cap room, it's not just the dead money, it's not just all that stuff. It's that these guys, that Frank Reich and Chris Ballard, both came to the Colts to work with Andrew Luck. Like, they both did. And now he's not here. So they have to make a plan B. And they're not making excuses by any means, but it's definitely a storyline to keep an eye on,
Yeah, it's just the harsh reality of the NFL is usually what happens at quarterback determines whether or not a team is successful, and by extension, whether or not the decision makers are successful. It's obviously been pointed out that Jim Irsay is generally gives people a little more time than other owners, which I've argued before and will argue again, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree.
But it does. It just changes things. If you have the right quarterback, you can be somewhere for a decade or more, and if you are searching for a quarterback, that's the easiest way to end up way to not get a decade.
Yeah. And Frank did. I will say Frank talked about kind of this balance that Chris is trying to strike, which is trying to win now because the owner and the fans expect you to win now, while also balancing the future. Now, I think there was one question about drafting a quarterback. Frank didn't really get into it. I don't think he wanted to be baited into anything like that, especially not a month out. But obviously there's still this possibility that even with Phillip Rivers on the roster, even with Jacoby Brissett on the roster, who we'll talk about in a second, there's this possibility that that they draft somebody and that guy is the future and that Rivers is the bridge, so and that could be the next step in this plan.
Yeah, the quarterback uncertainty going forward, because even if they don't draft somebody, all of this stuff comes up again next year.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because Rivers' contract is up, so unless they sign him before the end of the season, or unless they sign him right away at the end of the season, we're talking about, are they going to re-sign Rivers? Who knows what happens with somebody like Derek Carr in Oakland? Yeah. Do the Raiders do something? Like a whole new set of veteran options become available. A whole new set of draft options become available.
Yep.
So the quarterback uncertainty. I mean, they really like Rivers right now, but in terms of beyond this season, it's a pretty tough spot.
It's weird. If the Rivers thing doesn't go well this year, and say they go, even if they draft a guy or bring somebody else in, it could be entirely possible that Frank Reich will enter his fourth year coaching the Colts with a fourth different starting quarterback.
Which is not what he thought was going to happen.
No, he thought he was going to have Andrew Luck, and he had him for 1 year. Then he had Jacoby Brissett. Now he's got Phillip Rivers.
And it was a great 1 year.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. Maybe one of the
arguably the best of the
Andrew's career.
Seasons Luck had.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely I thought there was more to come. Absolutely this year, or last year I should say, but obviously didn't work out that way. So they replaced him. Yeah, this is a good segue. They replaced him with Jacoby Brissett, and ultimately Jacoby just doesn't get the job done, at least not to the level that they expected. Now, Frank said a lot of nice things about Jacoby today. like I said, still believes he's a starter in the NFL. Actually, we're going to still, I think we'll see some Jacoby on the field, but I want to get to that first, that conversation that he had with Jacoby about not starting anymore. They had to call him that, Monday or Tuesday or whatever that was, and to tell him that this Rivers thing is happening. And Frank didn't disguise it. He said Jacoby was not happy. He was upset about it. I think he wanted another shot. I think Frank wanted to give him another shot, but obviously the opportunity to get Rivers overrode that. But now Jacoby goes to this awkward spot now of going from, well, it's essentially starter to backup to starter to backup again. And that's going to be a really interesting transition for him, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that can be underestimated how difficult that is. To have been given a chance to be the guy, been given a contract that says you've got 2 years to be the guy, and then not do it and be brought back to the same team. A team, let's not. I don't think this should be discounted. That really likes Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, just
the players do, and so I think there's an interesting dynamic there, and it's going to be interesting to watch how Brissett handles himself going forward in this situation, because it's tough. He had the job he wanted with a franchise that he wanted to have it with. It didn't necessarily think he was going to, and thought he had it for 2 years, and that's not how it's going to work out. So it's going to be interesting to see how he handles himself in this. He's been given a ton of praise for the way he's handled everything in Indianapolis, from teammates, coaches, Chris Ballard, all of those guys have given him a ton of praise. And now this is the real test of his abilities and his personality as a leader. It's the most important. Like this is going to be the toughest test, because things are not going the way it needs to go right now.
No, and I just I tried to ask Frank this, and I thought he gave a pretty good answer, and I'll write about it later. But it's something that Frank's kind of had to do in his career. Like a couple times, he was a starter and a critical starter on a team that ended up going to the Super Bowl in big games. Obviously, he was filling in for Jim Kelly at that time, as you guys all know what I'm referencing. But he's had to go from critical component to the bench, and he watched Nick Foles win a Super Bowl as the backup, and then have to go. And then obviously he left, but Nick had to go back to the bench behind Carson Wentz. So he's had some experience dealing with this. And how tough that transition is going to be. Obviously, it's going to be unique to Jacoby. The situation is very different. But I guess if there's anybody that you'd want to help kind of coach you through it, Frank's probably the guy.
Well, and the other thing is Frank's not the kind of person who would just like throw him back at and just and not deal with it. I think he's going to deal. I think back to something his wife told me when I wrote last year when I wrote a story on him during his time as a pastor, and it's about just like what Frank's real gift is, and I'm trying to look up the exact quote now, but essentially what she was saying was his real gift is seeing people where they are and figuring out how to meet them in that moment.
Okay.
And I think that's the kind of person you need to handle something like this. I found it. His gifts really are unearthing the best in other people, no matter what he's doing. It was always serving humanity first, and then once we've served humanity in the way they should be treated and respected and loved, then we will get the best out of them. And so that quote right there, once we've served humanity in the way they should be treated and respected and loved, I think he feels acutely, and not just because of his backup quarterback past, just his past and his nature as a human. His nature as a human is to understand pain and to step into it. And so I think that's probably I think that's going to go a long way towards whatever Brissett's got to do to figure out how to deal with this.
Yeah. I mean, and we've talked about this before, but we know how much Frank likes Jacoby, and I honestly do. I honestly think that Frank is unhappy about the look this gives Jacoby. Like, they chose somebody else over him, therefore he's bad. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what they decided. And I don't think Frank likes that story. You know what I mean? I don't think he agrees with that story. for Jacoby.
Right.
I think he thinks. I flat out asked him, "Do you believe Jacoby's a starter in the NFL still?" He said yes, and he, thank God he said, that he has a very reliable backup in the NFL again, because in his experience, good backups are critical to Super Bowl runs. Again, Nick Foles, him, as serving as pretty big examples of that. Now, I will say we can get into this other aspect of this, which was Frank didn't dismiss the idea of still using Jacoby. He talked about.
No, and that came out of left field. I was not expecting that.
No, I think it's one of the more interesting parts.
I was asking, for those who don't get to see these things, I was asking a question about, Frank had spoken earlier about how Rivers can still run RPO stuff even though he can't run. And so I was asking a follow-up question to that, and Frank floated the idea that they could use Jacoby in that way for 5 to 7 snaps a game, which is sort of like the Taysom Hill thing.
Yeah.
Now, before anyone flips out on me, I am well aware, having covered both of them, that Jacoby Brissett is not Taysom Hill as a runner. But Frank was saying, the thing about Jacoby is he's really hard to bring down. And I wonder if maybe that's a short yardage type of thing.
Oh, it 100% is. He kept saying we were really good in certain situations. I don't want to get into it. I'm like, you're talking about 4th and short. You're talking about 4th and short or 3rd and short. You absolutely are.
Right. His strength and that part of Jacoby that just won't go down is very helpful in those. And he's not fast. I'm just going to say that out loud. He's not fast. He's not that mobile.
Yes.
But he is good at breaking tackles and getting 4 to 5 yards. And in short yardage, that's all you need.
He is weirdly elusive, no doubt. I mean, there you can see that that athleticism. Again, I talked to a lot of his teammates about that basketball athleticism he brings to the football field, and they say it's very real. And again, Colts fans see this. They see how elusive he was in the pocket, how he's able to. I mean, everybody remembers him slipping out of a Von Miller sack. And throwing a bullet to Hilton. I mean, there were a lot of those. I mean, you go back and look at the Brissett highlight tape from last year. Obviously, not a lot of good. I mean, there's a lot of bad, but there were so many times where he stepped up in pressure and eluded pressure and slipped through guys' tackles and made some plays. So I understand where Frank is coming from on that, and I kind of like the idea of them being open to doing that. I think didn't we ask Frank last year at one point about quarterback sneaks and how there are some quarterbacks who are willing and some who are not, essentially?
Yes, and some guys who should do it and some guys who should not do it.
Yeah, and again, I don't know. I can't say I've seen a lot of Phillip Rivers quarterback sneaks or I know if he's willing or unwilling, but we know Jacoby's willing, and if he's good, and he was good in those situations last year, so wouldn't be surprised to see, at least in those situations, some Jacoby. And definitely some RPO.
I'm a little skeptical of it as a strategy.
Why?
Honestly.
Why?
Because Jacoby's not, I don't know, he's not the kind of guy that I can think of. I mean, I know he can run sneaks, but that's not 5 to 7 plays a game.
Oh, no, I think sneaks are, maybe 1 or 2 a game, maybe. And then I definitely think there's going to be some 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 RPO stuff with him.
Yeah, I don't love it as much. I'd rather just have Rivers in there.
Well, you should text Frank and be like, listen. I think it's a bad idea.
Care what Joel thinks.
I've thought about it for a half an hour, and I don't like it.
I didn't like it a half an hour ago either. We were on video though, so I was holding my face. But I feel like I get that he's strong, and I get what they're saying, but I would rather have Taysom Hill doing it. I would rather have somebody who's a dynamic runner. As opposed to somebody who's more of I'm really gonna have to force my way in there and just kind of gut it out. I want to have the ability to really do something dynamic if you're gonna use him in that role.
I like Jacoby's a smart guy. I definitely think on a 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3, if you're asking him to read a linebacker and give the ball to Marlon Mack or pull it out and throw a quick slant to Hilton or just run, I don't mind that. If those, you know what I mean? I kind of trust Jacoby in a situation like that. I'm not saying.
In that situation, I would rather just trust Rivers to either give the ball to Marlon Mack or find the receiver.
I mean, which is how this started. You and I are talking about. I mean, 90% of the time that's what it's going to be. 95% of the time, that's what it's going to be. But I think those 5, there's going to be a few shots a game, maybe for Jacoby to do something like that. I kind of like it.
Well, we are on opposite sides of this coin.
That's fine. You hate creativity.
If he was a different quarterback, I might be more interested in it. I'm trying to think. Taysom Hill's the obvious one, but he's kind of a unicorn, and he's not really a quarterback.
So you say.
Now anybody who's listening to this from New Orleans might disagree with me, but I don't think he's really a quarterback. I'm trying to think if there's another backup who fits that. Off the top of my head.
Well, if the Chargers sign Cam Newton, Tyrod Taylor and Cam Newton would be kind of fun.
Yes. Yeah.
Trying to think who else makes sense in this situation.
But Cam Newton, if you're gonna run somebody into the line, you're gonna do that with Newton anyway.
Yeah. I guess not if you wanted to stay in one piece. By the way, some Colts news. Not that it's surprising, but
it's not real news.
Yeah, Reese Fountain has officially signed his tender. So I think he probably signed it today. Would be my guess. That's the newsy part.
This is okay. This is the reason for people who wonder why I said it's not news. It was news when I reported it at the beginning of free agency that they'd given him the tender.
Right, and he has to sign it pretty much.
But the reason it's not news now is that once they say they're going to tender him it's a minimum contract. He has two options. He can either sign it and play for the Colts or not play football.
I agree. I'm just saying
those are his options.
The thing is, he took a pen and he made his mark with his name on it, and now that's official, and that's what happened today. That's all I'm saying. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. No, I mean, when they extend the tender, that's what matters. They have to sign it.
I get it. I understand.
I've never heard of an exclusive rights free agent being like, you know what I'd rather do? I would rather sit out football next year. I've never heard of that in my life.
Well, it didn't happen here, so we'll just keep an eye out for that situation happening sometime soon. But anyway, to get back to your point, you hate creativity, and the Colts trying to be creative, and you just want to see.
No, I like creativity when the subject is the right person for the job.
I think
is that harsh? Was that overly harsh?
Yes, I think it is, because I think you saw some of Jacoby's strength last year. I mean, the guy is not a 0 at quarterback. Like, there are strengths. And I think that if his
strength is more evading than it is creating when he's running. To me.
We'll see. I don't know. Out in open space, he didn't make a lot of people miss, but he also didn't go down easy. He gained the extra couple yards. Wasn't really a sliding quarterback, that Jacoby Brissett.
Please go watch Taysom Hill running the football.
I'm not comparing him to Taysom Hill. I'm not comparing him to Taysom Hill. I'm just saying he has some strengths.
I am, because he's the only guy in the NFL that I can think of that's used it that way right now.
That's not an innovative...
And there's a very clear reason why the Saints do it, because his skill set running the ball he's like a bruising halfback.
I agree, but
more than he is a quarterback.
It's a dangerous way of thinking. Like, just because I haven't seen it work before doesn't mean it can't work. It works with Taysom, but it could also work in a different variation with Jacoby.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we're going to be carrying this. We're never going to... We probably won't even see it in, like, training camp either, so we're going to be carrying this into, like, week 1 and week 2. It'll be fun.
We might not see it in the regular season. This will continue to go on.
You don't think we'll see... You think Frank's bluffing?
This will be next year's Subway bet. You'll be betting that it's going to happen. I'm betting that it doesn't.
Jacoby Brissett runs for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns this year. Let's go. No, just kidding. Please don't take that bet. All right, well, we're going to move on. Some other things that Frank talked about we can get into real quick. Vinatieri, they don't know yet. Anything else you want to add to that? They're still waiting for him to rehab.
No, that was a good update. That was strong.
Thanks.
They don't know yet.
Don't know. They still don't know.
Rehabbing.
I still can't imagine them going with Vinatieri when you have a 24-year-old kicker who's pretty good, but okay. That's just, yeah, we'll move on from there. Frank talked about this, but we don't necessarily need to talk about this in light of what Frank said, but the Colts made some significant moves over the last week that we haven't really talked about in the podcast yet. Definitely rearranging what they did at corner. Sheldon Day added to the interior. We have those moves. And then I would definitely want to talk about some Colts offensive weapons that they don't have and are lacking and might address here in the draft. But let's go back to corner. They cut Pierre Desir. That was kind of surprising. Again, obviously Pierre didn't have a very good season, but I think you and I both expected, because of the contract they gave him last year, they were going to give him a chance to bounce back and know that he played through some injuries last year. But they decided to go a different road. They pay Xavier Rhodes a little bit less.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, you like that? A couple was it about $2 million ultimately less than Pierre was going to make?
Yeah.
So I think
Pierre was scheduled for 6.8-ish.
Yeah,
or something like that, off the top of my head.
And Xavier's going to get around 5, I believe. And then,
we haven't seen that deal in full, but it was reported as roughly 5.
No, I mean, at this point, what they've done is they've essentially added Xavier Rhodes and TJ Carey for less money than they would have had to pay Pierre.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that trade?
Carey and Rhodes both have to play a lot better than they did last year, and obviously Pierre Desir did too. It gives them an extra body, but the TJ Carey lost jobs both on the outside and on the inside last year in Cleveland,
right?
Which is not like a great cornerback team. Rhodes was by stats one of the worst quarterbacks in the league.
Wait. They had Cleveland was Greedy Williams and Denzel Ward are pretty good.
Oh, that's true. Okay, sorry. The problem is you start thinking of the Browns as a dumpster fire, and it's just hard to get that out of your head.
It's just habit. I know, but I agree.
But he had jobs and lost both of them.
Right. Yeah.
Great guy. I mean, incredible dude. But you're kind of hoping that those guys bounce back. And Carey isn't. I don't think TJ Carey's in line to play a lot right now. He's in line to be depth. And really, he's there in case Kenny Moore gets hurt, I think.
That's what I see. To me, that's what I loved. I'm very happy you asked Chris Ballard this question during our 4-hour press conference at the end of the year. But you said we all saw the defense fall apart without Kenny Moore, and Roland Milligan did his darndest to try to fill in, but it just wasn't the same without him. And Chris pretty much said, we tried to fill in. It's hard to find a really good backup for Kenny. But I think he just found one. I don't know if I don't know how really good he's going to be, but definitely more reliable than a guy like Roland Milligan, in my opinion. And I think highlighted by what you asked Chris during the press conference, which was you can't let your defense fall apart when you lose one guy.
Right. And it's one thing to have a great slot, but you have to have somebody in. Now, I think that the mistake they maybe made was that they didn't keep Shaq Taylor. I thought they had a young player there who had some success and was developing, and maybe you can keep him.
Yeah, that would have been. He got kind of crunched out in the kind of numbers crunch last year.
He got stuck in a numbers crunch, and I think there may have been a place you could have got it elsewhere. I can't remember exactly who was on the roster at the time to know.
Was it Chad Kelly? Because
I don't remember. I don't remember exactly because it was in that November-ish range.
Okay, maybe it wasn't Chad Kelly yet. Okay. Anyway.
But I thought that he showed some promise, and that he ended up getting away, and you probably don't want to. But in the absence of that, you definitely need to have somebody better in the slot, and somebody more capable of playing like the slot that Moore plays.
Yeah.
Instead of sort of like a hybrid big nickel on some downs, and then a cover player on another downs. Because unfortunately, when you do that, teams get the same thing as if you have a running back who only runs in short yard, who only runs between tackles, and one who only catches the ball.
Yeah.
It's a tell. So I will say this: the one thing I really do like about the TJ Carey signing is it does not cost them any money at all.
Yeah,
so
that minimum.
If he really doesn't have it, it's not going to hurt them at all.
No, just hurts. Just the only thing that hurts is Jim Irsay's wallet. That's pretty much it. So,
and let's face it, $1 million does not hurt Jim Irsay's wallet.
Correct. No, you know what? There's a couple things I didn't even include in the story outside of what you said. Him being having a reputation as a great teammate and a great person to have in your city. Couple things I liked about just the stats I was looking at. I really liked that he has 6 forced fumbles, and he had 3 in the last 2 years, despite not playing a ton. Seems like he's kind of a guy in the slot that will go for the ball, try to create turnovers. I liked that. He had 2 picks.
Yeah, so. That's like Kenny Moore. Yep.
Right. And the other thing, he also had 2 sacks the last 2 years. Again, not a ton, but a couple sacks. I haven't seen, but I'm going to imagine they're coming out of the slot. So
Well, 2 sacks from a defensive back too is a lot of sacks.
Exactly. I mean, unless you're Kenny Moore, that's a lot of sacks. So I mean, that's to me again. You kind of got Kenny light, or maybe even like discount Kenny, or severely discount Kenny. But I just kind of liked. He's a veteran. He's played in a couple different systems. He's 6 foot. He kind of fits the Colts size requirement for at least for the outside guys, but with also being able to play inside. I liked having TJ Carey there. You kind of have like the Rhodes / Yasin insurance, and then you have like, hey, if Marvell Tell doesn't quite come along the way we think, at least we have this guy. Like I just kind of liked adding a veteran presence that you just, like you said, don't necessarily have to count on, but he's there if you need him.
Right. And at the veteran minimum, at $1 million a year, it's not that big a deal. I don't know that it's. Let's put it this way: I've got a wait and see approach on whether or not Rhodes and Carey make the secondary a ton better.
Yeah, you are. I mean, can I out you on Xavier Rhodes or no? Not yet.
Let's put it this way: just temper what I said.
Okay, what Joel said is he's skeptical about whether Xavier Rhodes can bounce back to the player he was a few years ago. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I think that's fair. Again, I think that's, I was teasing you, but that's fair.
Here's totally the other thing about Xavier Rhodes. He's a big corner.
Yeah.
And the guys that play well a long time at corner tend to be speed guys.
Okay.
Or maybe not like like he's listed at 6'1", 218. That's a big dude.
Can I tell you what Chris Ballard would say to you in that exact instance?
Peanut Tillman?
Peanut Tillman. Wow, you nailed it. Yes, exactly that. Played well into his 30s.
Tillman
big guy, not fast.
Peanut Tillman is more of an outlier though than the rule.
Fair enough. No, I'm not. Again, I'm just saying that I think that would be what Chris Ballard said. I think Peanut was 6'2", big guy, not fast, and obviously played well into his early.
Charles Woodson
30s.
Charles Woodson 6'1".
Charles Woodson also, but Charles Woodson is that's a different animal, I think.
As he got older, he started moving. Charles Woodson's probably the best slot of all time.
He's one of the best slots of all time. He's one of the best outside corners of all time, and he was a pretty darn good safety when he tried that too. So yeah. Charles Woodson might be like, I mean, in terms of athleticism, I'm not sure him and Xavier Rhodes are on the same level.
And I kind of have some previous NFL like PTSD from covering Brandon Browner with the Saints.
Ah, yes, yeah.
They brought him in, another big guy whose play maybe had fallen off. He didn't have to. They didn't make him do anything other than cover big dudes in New England, which is Belichick being a genius. And then they brought him in at the Saints and made him do more. It did not go well. It went very poorly. Now I think here they're smart enough to give Rhodes help if he needs it, but it's just it's been 2 years since he was really good, and he's going to have to really turn it around to get back to who he was.
The way I described it, or at least the way you and I were talking about this on the phone yesterday, the way I kind of look at it is it's like a hitter in a slump, and he's going back to his old hitting coaches that got the best out of him a few years ago. And that's what he's doing. He's going back to Alan Williams and Jonathan Gannon, guys he thrived with in Minnesota, and said, "Okay, help, fix me." You know what I mean? Let's get rid of all these penalties, and get me back to the All Pro that I was. That's the way it looks like to me.
Well, and the other thing is, it's the same thing as the Carey deal. It's not that much money if it doesn't work out. The problem is, if it doesn't work out, it does hurt you on the field. For sure. If Rhodes doesn't work out, because Rhodes is going to play, right. I would assume.
This is unless Marvell Tell or the completely unexpected happens, Quincy Wilson takes a step forward, and we need to talk about that for a second. But you're counting on Xavier Rhodes to be a starter and a good one.
Right, and so it's not like Carey. Carey is versatile depth.
Right.
Who is not expected to play a lot. Rhodes right now is expected to play a lot.
Yes. And
I don't think that's going to change. And so if he doesn't play well and say Desir plays a lot better in New York than he did last year, then the move looks different.
I agree. All right, so answer me a quick question about Quincy Wilson, because I I'll be honest with you, and this is not a reflection of how I feel about Quincy. It's a reflection of how I thought the Colts felt about Quincy. I'm kind of stunned he's still on the roster.
Well, he is making.
Okay, good start to the argument.
He is making not very much money.
True.
He is making. I'm trying to get to it right now. His base salary in 2020 is $1.25 million. It's the end of his rookie deal.
That's actually more than I thought it was. I am double downing on surprised that he's still on the roster.
I don't think. Well, that doesn't save you that much cap wise, though.
Doubling down, not double downing. Man, I'm brutal.
It doesn't save you that much if you release him. It just doesn't. It's just $1 million.
Just $1 million.
We're talking about
just
the NFL,
kidding. I know.
So not like for me. For me, $1 million would be a ton and life-changing. But
no, but he's what, at best 6th on the depth chart now? Am I doing that math right?
No.
You got Rhodes, Moore, and Rock.
Rhodes, Yassine, Moore, Carey,
and Tell.
Yeah, 6th.
So okay. Yeah, I'm surprised.
I still think that he's a candidate to be this year's guy who gets traded for a late round pick during the draft.
The Henry Anderson of the team here, or who else was it? Well, they did Nate Harrison last year.
Last year was Hassan Ridgeway. The year before that, I believe, was Henry Anderson.
Oh, during the draft, yeah. And then they also traded Nate Harrison right before the season started. So, yeah, okay. Well, that's true. I just but if they draft a corner, that's it. I mean, I just don't see it. And again, this has nothing to do with my how I feel about Quincy Wilson, because we just frankly didn't see him enough last year to make an evaluation. But I just the way the Colts treated him as a guy who doesn't really play special teams, the guy they didn't really trust to play outside. He only really kind of had his best time when he was playing on the inside against Kansas City, and then didn't get a chance to really do it again. He didn't have a very good game against Tampa Bay, if I remember right. But yeah, I don't know. Just the way the Colts seem to feel about Quincy, I'm just kind of surprised he's still here.
Well, like I said, he doesn't cost much. He's on his rookie deal. You probably you'd like to get something out of him,
right?
Rather than just the release. It is a little surprising, but like I said, at the same time, he doesn't cost anything. So releasing him doesn't necessarily get you anything at this point.
Well, I agree.
Other than just a roster spot.
I know, but we're talking about Chris Ballard, who's cut 3rd round picks. You know what I mean? He's done it.
That's true. That's true.
After what, 2 years? When did he cut Terrell Basham?
A year and a half in, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, and it, again, and this is one of those here, I'll throw this out there. Would you be entirely surprised if Tyquan Lewis was not on the team at the end of camp?
No.
Neither would I. I think Tyquan needs a really great camp to make this team.
I think that's true for both of them. I think both Tyquan and Quincy Wilson are in danger of being cut at the end of camp.
I agree. And we can get more into this later. I mean, obviously we're moving on, but the corner situation is really interesting to me in terms of what the moves they made. You want to touch on Sheldon Day a little bit and what they're adding there? Because I know you got a chance to talk to him by yourself, and obviously he knows DeForest Buckner pretty well. And so what are the Colts adding there?
Well, Sheldon Day is a lot like the Carey signing. I don't necessarily know that he's an enormous difference maker. He is good depth. He's probably better defensive tackle depth than they had last year. And he's got some versatility to move around. But he's also, like Carey, a guy that you bring in and instantly improves your locker room and stuff and things like that. I think he's, depending on who they keep adding, they gave him it's $1 million guaranteed, worth up to $1.75 million. That's kind of a deal where you want to keep the guy around, but not really. So I think he's probably a favorite to make the roster, but I don't think he's a lock.
Okay.
And so it's a veteran who improves a spot that was really thin last year. I said all along that I thought they were going to add at least 2 defensive tackles. They've added 2 now, yep. So they don't feel like they have to go get one in the draft. But I think there's still a possibility they go get one in the draft. And it maybe changes Day's role or his outlook.
Okay, I want to transition there because I think that was pretty good coverage of that. One thing you and I both thought was they were going to go add one or two of was receivers in free agency, and they haven't done anything there. Now, I'm not closing off I don't want to close the door to a trade. I think there are some receivers out there that the Colts could trade for, but Frank said today receiver is still a position they're looking hard at, which is a direct quote. They like the guys they have, but they're looking hard at receiver. I fully expect them to spend a pick at receiver in the draft. Is that what we're looking at now at this point? I mean, like I said, I'm not closing the door on a trade or a free agent acquisition, but it seems like they're maybe more focused on the draft now.
Any trade or free agent acquisition at this point is going to be a buy low, buy low and hope that it turns into something sort of acquisition. It's not going to be you're not bringing in a number 2 at this point. You're taking flyers on guys at this point in free agency. A trade would be different if you trade, but I think to some degree, the fact that they traded for Buckner makes it a little less likely that there's a trade for a wide receiver.
Right. You don't want to trade more picks. I mean, maybe a player for player or something like that.
Right. Well, and that'd be really interesting if you could turn one of your players who's disappointing into somebody else's player who's disappointing but you like. That could get really interesting.
Yeah, and for sure.
But what you could get in free agency right now is not starting caliber, and that means I think you could put down money and bet that the Colts are going to take a wide receiver in the draft. And they might do the thing that a couple teams have done recently where they take like 2 or 3.
That's what I was thinking. I think I like the guys they have on the roster. I like T.Y. Hilton. I like Zach Pascal. I like Paris Campbell. And they're going to bring back Reese Fountain. But I think they need to add maybe 1 or 2 more guys. And if that's in the draft, that's fine. But I think you just need
maybe one on the second day, one on the third.
That's what I was wondering. Are you expecting? I mean, to me, again, I'm fully expecting a day 2 pick of a receiver, whether that's round 2 or round 3. I'm expecting at least one of those picks to be a receiver.
I think so too, because they need guys in the pipeline. They need starting caliber guys in the pipeline. Even if you like their receivers better than I think really any of us do, you're still going to need to have those guys in the pipeline, and you need people there in case Hilton starts to fall off. So I think you've got to use a day 2 pick. I mean, we keep saying day 2 because there is no day 1 pick.
I agree. Well, I do want to get into that though, because we had a listener specifically ask about the scenarios of moving back into the first to pick a quarterback. I definitely think this is not the time to go totally into it, but we will. I assure you, we will talk about this in the future podcasts. But I was curious about your sense of that, what you've been reading, what you've been seeing, what you've been hearing. Do you see it as a possibility of the Colts trying to move back into the first to pick a quarterback, assuming they like somebody?
I'm still sort of assuming that the quarterbacks are all going to be gone.
So you think, obviously, we're talking Burrow, we're talking Tua, and you're thinking in the top 5, I'm guessing for sure, maybe top 3. But you think Herbert and Love maybe in the top 10 still?
Yeah. If not top 10, I think in the top 16.
I think you might be right.
I don't. There's so many quarterback needs. Like the quarterback needs above the Colts, where the Colts were picking at 13, haven't really been addressed, to be honest.
It's true.
The Bengals still need a quarterback. The Lions still could possibly take a quarterback. The Panthers signed Teddy Bridgewater, but also could take a quarterback.
Correct.
The Raiders could still take a quarterback. The Chargers. The Chargers very clearly could take a quarterback.
Oh, I think they
will. The Chargers look like they're going to take a quarterback. The only team that maybe looks more like they're going to take a quarterback than the Chargers is the Bengals.
Oh, I was going to say Miami. They're not going with Fitz by himself next year.
Well, and there's a report from Armando Salguero today, who knows what he's talking about, that the Dolphins would like to move to 1. So they definitely want a quarterback.
Hey, Washington could theoretically not like Dwayne Haskins. Detroit could maybe want to get a backup for Stafford. I mean, there's other options there too.
New England, Tampa,
Yep.
There's a lot of teams that could take quarterbacks, and so I don't think that those guys are going to. I don't think those 4 are going to get out of the first round.
Here's what I'll tell you.
I think there's a chance they don't get very far in. I don't think there's a chance that they're still around late at night. I think they might be gone in the first half of that round.
I will say this, and this is the caveat of every team has their own chart, okay? So just listen when I say that. Every team has their own chart, but if you're using the Jimmy Johnson chart, which is not a bad way of looking at things, just to kind of give you an idea, the Colts' 2 second-round picks, in theory, could get them up to pick 16 if they did that, if they wanted, again, to Atlanta at 16. Now, I'm not. I think people are curious about how high they could get up. Now, again, if you add a third or a fourth, you can probably climb even higher, or a first from next year. Or there's obviously a million different scenarios you could play out that way. But I just wanted people to know that that's kind of where it is. And then there was a lot of talk about trading back into the back end of the first. That probably wouldn't take both of your twos. That would probably end up being 34 and a 3 or 34 and a 4.
And all of that's interesting. Getting to 16 is interesting, but I'm still of the mind that everyone's going to jump up and take these guys really early.
I agree. And again, so I honestly, like I said, I will freely admit I kind of missed on the Rivers thing. I thought they were going to go a different direction. So, but my instinct on this is if you had to pin me down and say who are they drafting at quarterback, I would be more in the like Hurts, Eason range than one of those 4 guys we mentioned. Just because I'm with you. I think they're going to get picked pretty high.
Yeah, I think it's more of a second round pick if they really like somebody there, or maybe lower.
Yeah, right.
Who knows?
Yeah, it could be Morgan, could be Montez, could be a number of other guys. But like I said, I just don't see them getting into the range of those 4 guys not because they don't like them, they might. But I kind of, to me, the trading the first round pick kind of signaled in my mind, okay, we don't think we're going to get these guys, or we don't like them enough. I mean, it was one of the two.
Well, I know that they've looked very hard at all of the top quarterbacks that are coming out.
Right.
And I know that everybody that you would think of who would have to look at them have looked at them very closely. And I think that's a good read on the situation. Is that they thought that they were going to be gone.
Yeah. I think that's where they're at. So we can get, like I said, I'm as the draft gets closer, you and I will be happy to dive more into these scenarios and what we think might happen. Hell, we might even do a mock draft. We'll see. But last thing I want to
if we do a mock draft, I will make you do it the way I like to do it, which is not the way most people like to do it.
Well, give us a quick hint of what that is.
So I spend so much time on the Colts that as much as I like the rest of the NFL, I do not know other teams' needs, in depth.
Okay.
I just don't. And so trying to guess all 32 teams feels dumb to me.
Yeah, I get that.
Because I don't know. So what I like to do is I like to have a draft simulator, do all the other picking, and then I would prefer we just get to the Colts pick, and you and I kind of go back and forth as to how the Colts might be thinking of it. And then we try to make a pick based on it. It's more of a thought exercise than it is an actual prediction. But I like it better because it adds the randomness back in, and also, like I said earlier, I don't know what all 32 teams are doing.
Yeah, no, I like that idea a lot. We could definitely plan to do something like that later in, I'd say this month, but we're still technically in March. But later in April, we'll definitely try to do something like that. I do want to touch on one thing real quick. I asked Frank Reich this, and I wanted you to kind of touch on it. The guys that they've brought in from the outside, 5 guys, I've been kind of harping on this on Twitter for sure, but all of them have really, really good track records in terms of staying healthy and on the field. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And I also think they're almost like a little experiment. Like they're bringing in these 5 guys with good track records and then be like, okay, we have these outside guys. Are they getting hurt once they get here? Are we doing something wrong? Or, you know what I mean? Or, I don't know. I kind of like it's very interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I thought Frank Reich didn't say this, but I thought I thought it may be something where if you can't do physicals the way you'd like to, that you try to get but it sounded more like you're just trying to get guys that you know are going to be there. Reich has sort of over the last couple of years, I think, signaled his frustration. With not his frustration with players. I think it's just his frustration with really, like, I think the hardest part of the job, he said this last year, that the part he didn't realize about the job is just the roster management that goes into it.
Yeah.
Day in, day out, trying to know what to do. He said it right before training camp last year. I thought that was really interesting. I thought that's what came back today. It was saying, whatever we got to do to keep guys available, that would be a huge deal for us. So I think your instincts have been right in saying, okay, they're going after durable guys. Reich sort of backed you up on that. Now, I will say this. There is no guarantee that this is going to pay off for them the way that they would hope.
Of course. No, absolutely. That's why I kind of think
And the evidence is the receiving room last year. There's some weird things going on in the fan base where they think T.Y. Hilton's always hurt and they think Paris Campbell's always been hurt. But if you went back to the beginning of training camp last year, their top, who ended up being their top four, T.Y., Devin Funchess, Paris Campbell, and Chester Rogers, none of them had a history of injury issues. They'd all been durable for most of their careers.
Devin Funchess in his first 4 years missed 3 games total.
And they all got hurt.
Yeah.
All of them. And so there's no guarantee that just signing those guys is going to get it the way get what they want to get out of it.
I agree. I just think they're trying to eliminate maybe some risk in doing that. So I don't know. Like I said, it might not pay. Like you said, it absolutely could not pay off. But it is interesting to see that they've targeted these types of guys who have very, very. I mean, these 5 guys that we talked about have missed 1 game last year combined. 1. So it is interesting to me that the recent injury histories, especially, have been so good. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much we covered all the topics I wanted to hit. So I think we'll probably podcast again here soon. Usually when there's news, but if there's some news later this week, we'll do it again. If not, I think we'll probably get together next week and do another one. But yeah, I think that's unless there's anything else you wanted to add here, Joel.
No, I think we pretty much covered it. It was good to hear from Frank Reich. Fans might not be realizing this, but in theory, I was supposed to be getting back from the owners' meetings with extensive time with Irsay, Ballard, and Reich, and it was good to hear. It was good to hear from one of them at least after the free agent stuff before we get going to the draft.
Agreed. And we're scheduled to hear from, I think, Chris, I think we could say tentatively within the next 2-ish weeks. Tentatively.
We will definitely hear from him before the draft.
Yeah. Right. But so keep an eye out for that. We'll probably try to let you guys know when we know when that is, but we don't know for sure. But that'll be coming up, and that'll obviously be a fascinating press conference, given that he'll get to reflect on free agency and the trade he made so far, and then obviously the upcoming draft. So that should be fun. So that's it for us. Colts Cover 2. Look for our stuff. Joel's gonna be writing on Frank talking about Phillip Rivers today. A lot of what we talked about, I'm gonna be writing on Jacoby. So we'll have that up for you today on IndyStar.com and much more in the weeks to come. Thanks for joining us.